What was the guilty pleasure frisky encounter you enjoyed, but would never tell the people closest to you about? Story 1. This was years ago. We met online, chatted for a couple hours, got into some stuff, and then I suggested we meet at a local bar. She was around 40 and I was 25. Anyways, we had a drink and she wanted to leave. Go out to my car and we make out for a bit, and she says she's going to take off and she'll call me later. I figured that was it, and that I turned her off even though I did everything right. I get a text from her 5 minutes later with her address telling me to come over and just let myself in. I head over, walk in, and she was on the couch with her rear up in the air, wearing nothing but knee-high socks and a blindfold. Earlier, when we were chatting, I told her I had a thing for knee-high socks, and she had a fantasy about doing it with a stranger that she was never able to do when she was married. She'd recently divorced, though, and so we basically did everything you could do that evening. Never said a word for the next 2 to 3 hours. Story 2. Kept going at it down south after he finished, and he lost consciousness. He woke up quickly and was fine, though. This happened twice, and I've never felt more powerful in my life. Given the nature of it, I did make him see a doctor, and everything checked out fine. And it only ever happened again on one occasion, but for several months I was like, holy shit, I made someone finish so hard, they passed out. But then of course reality kicks in, and you've got to come up with a way to explain that to the doctor. Story 3. I finished off on a girl's face as her mom walked in the room. It was one of those holding it for days kind of finishes too. She threw her phone at her daughter, and her grandmother was on the phone and wanted to say hi. I was kicked out, go figure, so didn't hear the blow up. Though, it was the best 3.2-mile walk I've ever done back to campus. Story 4. I lost my V-card at a funeral. With a living person, just to clarify. I was 15, she was my high school girlfriend, and it was my grandmother's funeral. Some office. Not sure if it was the funeral director's or whatever, but I'm sorry to whoever's office it was. I feel like this set the tone for how weird I turned out. Also, I might be Mary Shelley. Honestly, this one's not even that weird to me. Like, intimacy can be a pretty cathartic thing at times. And in a situation like this, if he was close to his grandmother, it kind of makes sense that that's a possible place for his mind to wander to as an outlet for those emotions. And also, for those of you who are not aware, Mary Shelley was the original author of the Frankenstein novel. Story 5. I matched with an ex-teacher on Tinder. She said it would be too awkward to go out with me, but she sent me a nude. I, definitely used that picture many times. I had a huge crush on my 7th grade social studies teacher. She got divorced after a while, and I was delivering pizzas to her house one day when I was 19. God, my heart started racing when she answered the door. Years of adult entertainment scenarios prepared me for this. She paid and said bye, and I've never seen her again. Bro, when I used to deliver pizzas as a 20-year-old, a woman answered the door in just her towel. It was clear she'd just stepped out of the shower. She kept smiling and said, "Sorry, I know this is highly inappropriate." And then she'd pause for a sec. I legitimately thought she was going to make me an offer. My heart was racing like crazy. But she said, "I hope I didn't make it too weird." And then she just paid and closed the door. Honestly, that shit killed me. Story 6. I paid for an escort at 19. Her name was Lou, and she had like ridiculously large implants. We ended up going to Big Lots where I actually saw my parents in the parking lot while I was with her. My mom was mortified. Mom and Dad, this is Lou. Lou, this is my mom and dad. Yes, I know, son. Yes, we know, son. Oh God, could you imagine? That would be awkward. Also, why Big Lots? Was this like an exhibitionism thing? Trying to find a nice sectional sofa or something like that? Sounds to me like some risky business, on multiple levels. Well, at this point I think I might as well throw my hat in the ring and contribute. It was, her family pool. But she was an only child, so it's not like it got much use, and we never got to the end of things, if you catch my meaning. Story 7. She took off her underwear, stuffed them inside herself, before slowly pulling them out, shoving them in my face, into my mouth, and then holding them there while she got on top and just rode into the sunset. It's not as wild as some of these, but it changed my world. Not wild? You said she legit stuffed it inside herself. Like, bro, what? Story 8. When I was 23, I got together with a cute 38-year-old woman who I met in a bar. She was loads of fun, and we had a pretty great time, considering I was completely wasted. In the morning, she was a bit melancholy and was crying as I held her. She said that she'd always wanted to be a mother, but had wasted all her best years on bad relationships that went nowhere, and now it was really unlikely that she'd meet someone in time to have kids. In a moment of naive madness, I offered to surrogate for her, and to my huge surprise, she actually took me up on it. Before I could think twice, she had my butt cheeks clamped tightly between her legs, and I finished before I could even realize what happened. I think about her from time to time, and wonder if I actually have a kid out there somewhere. Want to know the real kicker? I couldn't even remember her name in the morning, and I was too embarrassed to ask. No way of looking her up, so I guess I'll never know unless the kid comes a-knockin'. Wow. On one level, kinda hot. On another level, completely fucking weird. Like, that's... Holy shit, dude. Story 9. Got my first down south action from a high school girlfriend under the blanket while her mom was working on the computer with her back to us on the other side of the room. I've been chasing that same mix of fear and excitement for the past 20 years. Yeah, the mom definitely knew. My son recently hit puberty, and I'm learning very quickly that my parents knew far more often than I thought when I was doing something stupid. My parents used to tease me about my unreasonably long showers, but nope, I was just super depressed and didn't have my own room. So that's where I had my pre-scheduled crying sessions. I've actually got a story from a high school buddy on this one. I guess they were taking like some sort of rented bus or big multi-seat van on a camping trip, him and some friends. And he was there with his girlfriend, and she was sitting in his lap, and I guess they had some sort of blanket over top of them as well. She proceeded to kind of roll her hips on his lap under the blanket, and so he unzipped and, pulled hers down a little bit, and they started doing it under this blanket while they were having a conversation on the way to their campsite on bumpy roads. So it all just kind of blended together and no one knew. Or maybe they knew and just didn't say anything. What happens on the camping trip stays on the camping trip and all that. Story 10. Senior year, I gave my friend some down south action at a sleepover while the other girls were asleep in the next room. She was complaining to me that nobody had ever gone down south on her, and the solution was glaring us right in the face. As far as I know, neither of us ever told anyone in the group, and we also never really brought it up with each other ever again. I knew this is what happened at girls' sleepovers in high school. Was this before or after the naked pillow fight? Oh god. Story 11. In a previous relationship, my ex and I would do drug-fueled amputee roleplay sessions. He was not an amputee. He just enjoyed being tied up, like he had no arms or legs. My days are much calmer now. Story 12. Oh, I've got a few. But screwing my high school bully's big brother in her basement was a highlight. Better, she and I had the same first name, so I guarantee that made it awkward in the house for at least a little bit. Story 13. Getting with my ex's aunt 2 years after we broke up, and I ran into her at a Jack in the Box. My cousin and I were just randomly looking for hangover food, and happened to decide that Jack in the Box was the place to go that day. I told him to head on home, and I went with her to her motel. No regrets. I always thought she was hot as hell, and we never saw each other again after that. Although I did hear a little while after that the reason she was staying in a motel was that she was kicked out of her mom's house and lost her job as an optometrist assistant. So she became an escort. She had the motel already as she was living out of it. We spent about 30 minutes catching up, and she invited me over. I used to be a pothead, and so was she. Then I told her I knew where to get some Molly, so we got some and things went from there. I guess in a sense that's kinda how I paid for her services. She had a rocky road of life, though. She had a meth and heroin addiction, had a kid with a guy that got deported, and then went to school and got that job as the optometrist assistant. And then there was some big fight because she developed a coke habit too, so she got kicked out, but her mom let her daughter stay. Story 14. I was 23, and my boss was an attractive 40-year-old woman. She invited me and a few other coworkers over to watch a football game. I was the last to leave, until her husband put on Pour Some Sugar on Me, her top came off, and so did my pants. We both screwed her senseless all night. We had a three-way a few times a week for months, and it was amazing. I hope they're both still happy. Story 15. Two exotic dancers one night ripped up my shirt, wrote slut on my chest with lipstick, and scratched me up pretty bad. Heck, one even bit me. I kinda liked it though. That's just what happens when your friends tell them it's your birthday. I was there alone at 3 a.m., so that ain't it. More like they were just bored. It sure does sound like a fun night, though. Story 16. My ex-wife cheated on me after 8 years of being married. I was devastated. One night, her best friend that she'd known since childhood texted me, checking in on how I was doing. She ended up coming over to our house, and we had a wild time throughout the entire night. Everything you could imagine happened between me and her that night. We both haven't spoke to each other since, and no one knows but us. And she's still my ex-wife's best friend to this day. Story 17. I went to Chicago for a distant family member's wedding. Second cousin once removed or something like that. But I screwed up on the date, so I got there 2 days early. I knew no one in Chicago that I was aware of, and my side of the family was from New York. It was the bride that was from Chicago. I spent 2 days touring the city, the museums, etc., and frankly, it's a really fun town. So my second early night there was a Thursday. I was so bored I called my client in New York who was always in Chicago because he did something involving the mercantile or whatever markets. As an aside, he worked for Bear Stearns, and we all know how that went about 5 years later. He suggested a venue that I go to on one of the sides of town, I forget what area though, and he said he always picked up someone when he went there. So I went to this bar he suggested, and it turned out to be a low-key upscale Irish-style bar, not unlike the thousands in New York. So I had a drink, then another, and another. I didn't get sloppy drunk, but I was definitely tipsy. I was 32 at the time for reference, and two decent-looking older women, probably late 40s, early 50s, were there. And I invited myself to sit with them. I told them my story, and turned out it was a good icebreaker. We started talking, and it became clear that they were from out of town, somewhere rural. And were just hanging out in the area to do some shopping and essentially whatever else presented itself. Of the two, one was a little curvy and the other was rail thin, and clearly a runner. Somehow, I ended up with the runner, and some guy their own age then moved on with the other woman. We ended up back at my hotel, and we went at it for hours. It was great. Older women can teach you a thing or two, let me tell you. And she said she preferred guys my age because our recovery time isn't measured in hours. Early the next morning, as the runner lady was getting ready to leave, there was a knock at the hotel room door. It was her friend. Apparently, the fellow had tapped out early, and she went back to her hotel. The runner lady had texted her and said she'd be stopping by. So, when she left, I spent a few hours with her friend. Oh, to be 32 again. Story 18. A few things. I went to a gay sauna in Amsterdam because I like saunas. I travel a lot for work and usually use the hotel health suite. This hotel didn't have one, and so I googled saunas and found a men-only sauna 2 streets away. Surely it's just a normal sauna where, gay guys can hang out, right? No, it's a sauna where gay guys go to hang out and screw the shit out of each other. And do it out in the open. As I was walking around, absolutely stunned by what was going on, I entered a dark room, which was packed with guys. I kept feeling hard hands on me, and then my towel got taken off. I felt hands all over me, and just kinda let it happen. One guy went down south while another was rubbing on my nipples, and honestly, it was the best finish I'd ever had up to that point in my life. I was standing up, but nearly collapsed. That was my one and only experience with other men, but now I can't finish without my nipples getting a little bit of action. It's like a weird obsession now. Well, if that ain't the definition of when in Rome. Story 19. I was seeing a lot of kinky people at the time, ethically, all out in the open, of course. And while tame compared to a lot of other things, one that I keep to myself is that the partners who were into being paddled, I'd have them bite down on my belt while I spanked them. I really enjoyed going to work wearing a belt that was pocked with teeth marks, because it was subtle, and there was pretty much zero chance that anyone would have guessed what it was or why they were there. Honestly, if exhibitionism's your thing, that's kind of a vibe. Story 20. I was in bed on Friday after a night out. Girl texts late asking if she can come over. She came over, and we went at it without protection. She stayed the night and left around noon the next day. When she'd gone, a friend came over asking me to help him out with some moving. I hadn't even showered, but I went with him. We got some food, had a few beers, and just sorta stayed out for the day. Ended up in a local club, and this girl came up and asked if I was taking her home. Long story short, she went to go down south, and I stopped her, saying rather sheepishly that I had done it without protection not more than 14 hours ago and hadn't cleaned up afterwards. This apparently turned her on massively, and she immediately started going to town best way I can describe it would be like a hot dog eating contest, proclaiming that she wanted to taste the other girl. I spun her around and ended up with my tongue up her rear while she gave me some mega down south action. Good times. Story 21. One time in my younger years, I met this girl with a filth fetish. She liked being absolutely defiled. One time we jumped into this dumpster and we're just really going to town when someone hit us with a bag of trash. It's not like they did it on accident either, because they definitely hurt us. But this just got her even more excited. Homegirl was fucking nuts. It was a fun experience, but it got really weird, so I bounced. That's why they call it a trash can as opposed to a trash cannot. Oh, Jesus, buddy, why? Ugh. Hard pass. On all of that. Hard pass. Story 22. Not me, but one of my best friends. Apparently, he used to get with our friend's mom when we were in school and he was off work. He was a couple years older than us. And he'd also stay the night over there and would get with her at night and then go back to the couch to sleep. He told me this 9 years after the fact, and he said that it went on for almost 2 full years. Blew my mind. He said he only did it because she propositioned him, and it was easy fun. Story 23. At a festival, super high, on a great combo. Saw my high school swim coach. She was still super hot and very receptive to physical contact. We danced and started making out, and she asked where we were staying, and I offered to show her. As we walked towards our camp, we found a lounge area to chill for a bit. We smoked a spliff, and she busted out K. I'd never dived down that rabbit hole before, and I was slammed with 10 times gravity and my head in space. She pulled a blanket over us and started going down south, and it felt crazy. After a bit, she somehow got on top of me and rode as I came back to reality. It was so dang surreal, and I haven't been able to replicate it. We hung out for 2 more days and hit it off like rabbits. All weekend. At the end of the festival, I asked her when we could connect next, and she said, my husband probably wouldn't be okay with that. I was crushed. Oh, and she had a baby about 9 or 10 months after, but I never asked questions or talked about it with her. Wow, okay, I feel bad for her husband. That is just... wow. That's one of the things that scares me the most about relationships, is like, she goes off to a festival and I have no idea what's going on, and just hope to God that I know the woman well enough. I've been lucky thus far, but it's always like you hear these stories and you just kind of go, God, like, if this wasn't a prearranged thing, like, you can go do XYZ at festivals and I'm okay, but you are not allowed to bring them back home, which I actually knew a guy that was the situation between the husband and wife, and he was the other guy. But if that's not the case, the husband probably has no idea that his wife is out doing this stuff, which is wild to me. And the baby thing, let's not even get into that. That's a whole nother thing. Now, since I mentioned it, I might as well tell that story about my friend and the kind of third wheel arrangement he got himself into. So, I don't know where he met this woman, but woman that was like twice his age. At the time, he's 22. and they were pretty frequent flyers. One day, after one of their interactions, she invites him back to her house, and they're going at it, and everything's good until they hear the garage door opening, and she says, "Oh shit, it's my husband. You have to hide." Buddy had no idea she was married. She was a high-powered business executive, so he just kind of assumed that she bought the house herself. And so what does he do? He hides in the only place he can find, which happens to be the shower behind the curtain, in the ensuite of the master bedroom where they were going at it. The husband comes in, and he knows. He can just tell. He's like, okay, where is he? Where is the guy? He starts searching around. The wife is all, I have no idea what you're talking about. Da, 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 da. And he pulls back the shower curtain and says, I told her, never in our bed. Get out. And he leaves. My buddy got out scot-free, and I think he kept seeing her afterwards. But, like, during that last 2 minutes before he got found, he thought he was going to get his face beat in. He knew he was going to get found eventually. He didn't know what the consequence was going to be. Boy got out completely unscathed, but I guarantee that marriage was on some pretty rocky roads after that. Now, with that said, let's hop into the rapid fire segment for stories too short to make a full entry out of, but too good to be left out. Let's jump in. Had a sixsome at a sandals resort when we just wanted to go to the hot tub for a late night dip. Hiring escorts disguised as professional masseuses. I met a girl in 1992. She asked if I'd watch her go solo on the beach towel we were both sitting on. It was nighttime, but it was good. Lost my virginity to a woman that was into violent CNC fantasy. Hell of a start. Finger up the butt. Nobody was expecting it, so cleanliness wasn't taken into consideration. Sorry, Jeff. Shoved a banana inside myself. I received some hand action from a very pretty 61-year-old woman in a psych ward. All this stuff is making me miss Craigslist. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.